Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this Thursday afternoon program. I'm Dylan Ryder from the Johnson County Library. We have the privilege to be joined by Denise Dias from the K-State Research and Extension, who will be discussing the topic of common sense budgeting. Denise is a county extension agent for family and consumer sciences at the K-State Research and Extension of Johnson County. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in home economics with a specialization in consumer textiles from the University of Nebraska. Denise also earned a Master's of Science degree in apparel marketing from K-State University and a Master's of International Business and Leadership from Friends University. Denise has a deep understanding of numerous extension programs in an urban setting. She is passionate about teaching, learning, and sharing her expertise with Johnson County. On a personal note, Denise is celebrating 24 years in extension. In her spare time, she enjoys sewing, cooking, and spinning fiber into yarn. She is married, has 2 grown children, 2 adorable granddaughters, and 1 sassy cat named Daisy.
Yeah, you have to include the sassy cat.
They'll include themselves, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Everyone, feel free to participate in our discussion by using the chat to add your comments and questions. Denise will attempt to address each question at different points throughout the presentation. Again, the contents of this program will be recorded for future viewing. Thanks again, and here's Denise.
So today's topic is common sense budgeting. This is a program that I have been teaching for the last few years, just to kind of help people, wrangle what money they have coming in, but also look at how they're spending their money and seeing if there are better ways to do that. So we don't need Zoom etiquette because that was for another program that I did a while back. But part of common sense budgeting is planning to stay ahead. With the COVID-19 crisis that we're kind of dealing with, when it first happened, we thought it would just be maybe a few weeks or a month or 2. But as we see time go on, it's not going away like we had hoped. And also, the economy has really changed too because of COVID. So the plan for most of us, especially if you've had someone in your family lose a job, maybe their income has been cut back. There's a lot of people that are going through like furloughs. I know Extension has talked about having furloughs for some of their employees. It's not like we're losing our jobs, but definitely cutting back on the income that we're expecting to get this year. So that's happening. A lot of people are taking pay cuts in order to keep their jobs. So a lot of those things are happening right now. So first of all, to plan to stay ahead is probably the best thing you can do. Developing a spending plan is critical so that what money you do have, that you're making the best and smartest decisions about that money. We're also going to talk about how you can stretch those dollars, whether it be shopping smarter or just spending smarter. We'll talk about that as we go along today too. And then also some goals for your income, whether that's, it could be a short-term goal of just surviving, getting through this financial crunch, or it could be something more long-term, like maybe, buying a home or a new vehicle or even a vacation. So we'll talk about that too. And then spending wisely, and of course, saving, and why it's important to have a little bit of an emergency fund set aside to help you deal with any kind of crises that come along. We'll talk all about that as we go. So here's a quick little quiz, and you can kind of do this yourself and kind of keep track of it. So yes or no, and the first question is your money gone before you get more? So like if you get paid on Friday, is it gone before your next payday comes around? The second question is, do you often wonder where your money was spent? for many of us, you know, it's like, boom, it's gone. Where did all that money go? Do you run out of gas for your car, or maybe, you run out of food, or have to kind of get creative in making those last few days before your paycheck, work out for you? Hopefully, do you receive collection notices for past due bills? Do you dream about buying something you think you could never afford? Do you pay some of your bills late every month? And then the last question is, do you borrow money from or food from families, friends, or even agencies to make ends meet? So if you answered yes to any one of those questions, and I think for most of us, even just wanting to do better with our money is definitely a good reason to develop a spending plan. So the first thing you have to do to make a spending plan is know how much you have coming in each month, okay? So even if you're on unemployment, or if you have some other source of income, whatever's coming in, you need to know what that total is each month. And then you need to look at how you spend your money. Oftentimes, I encourage people to take a piece of paper and fold it up into 8 little squares, and then write day of the week on the squares. And then the last square of the 8 squares is for totals. So on Monday, whatever you spent on Monday, you write it down. Whether it was, filling the car with gas, or getting a soda at Quick Trip, or going out for a sandwich at McDonald's, whatever it is. Every time you spend money, or pay a bill, you write it down. And do that for a couple of weeks. Ideally, if you could do it for a month, that would definitely give you a good idea of how your money is spent during that month. The other thing that's good about making a spending plan is making a plan to save. So for most people, I think the latest statistic I read was like 60 or 70% of people don't have an emergency fund. So that would be $500 to $1,000 set aside that they're not using each month, that if something breaks down, or if they have to replace like a appliance, or get something for their car fixed or whatever, they would have some money set aside. So, but most people don't have that emergency fund available, and that's really critical in financial stability in the long run. And then, of course, last, goals for yourself and your family. So, do you want to have a house? Do you want to maybe move to a different house, or enjoy a vacation? Whatever that goal is, that's part of that spending plan, is to give you something to work towards. So what money and resources do you currently have? So this is part of that process of looking at all the income you have coming into your home. So typically we think of like salaries or wages. It could also be Social Security, or if you have a pension, if you get child support or alimony or unemployment, those are all income that's coming in. So any of those in that first list are probably actually hard, fast dollars that you probably see that you can use to help with your budget. Now, some other things that are resources that help out. You may not see the cash for it, but you're still getting assistance for different things, whether that's some sort of medical assistance, earned income tax assistance, WIC or SNAP. We used to call SNAP food stamps. So those kinds of things, getting food from a food pantry, or free clothes, or help paying your electric bill, or whatever it is. Those are still resources that are coming in. And so you need to include those in your budget if it's something you use on a regular basis, okay? So where does your money go? We talked about writing it all down with just a simple piece of paper, and you can put that in a wallet or something. There are apps on your phone for those of you that have a smartphone where you can track your money that way. So one popular one that I know a lot of people use is called Mint, M-I-N-T. It connects your phone to your bank account and can kind of help you to see how your money is being spent, and kind of helps you to track all those little expenditures. Now, if you're spending money, actually cash money, it's not going to pick that up. But if you're spending it on a debit card or credit card or whatever, it does track all those things. So it's one way you can kind of look at where your money's going and what you're spending on those things. Like I said before, you need to track expenses for at least a month, and compare that to what's coming in and what's going out. So knowing, hopefully what's coming in is more than what's going out. If it's the opposite, you have more expenses than you do money coming in, then it's definitely time to stop and look and see where that money has disappeared. Okay, this is kind of a fun list. And when I teach this class in person, I usually have people, chime in and tell me where they get, extra income, a side hustle or an extra gig, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of things that you can do. Some people drive for like Uber or Lyft, or they deliver meals like for Grubhub. The pandemic has kind of changed that a little bit, that dynamic, but it still is a viable way of making some extra cash. You could take surveys online and get income. You could sell items online, stuff that you're not using. We talked about at one point you could use something like Craigslist, or now you don't even have to use that kind of an app. You could use an app like Macari or whatever, or even Facebook. There's a marketplace on Facebook if you're a Facebook user, but there's lots of different ways to sell items. A good old-fashioned garage sale is another way to get some extra income coming in. You could also, do social media marketing, rent out your home. Airbnb, that's really pretty popular nowadays. A lot of people like to do that versus going to a hotel. Maybe you have an extra room or something you could rent out. That might be something. I know some of the clients that I've worked with in the past, they've talked about, doing lawn work or gardening or babysitting for others, or even like plasma and blood donations, where they pay you for doing that. So, there are some interesting ways to get extra money, even just something as simple as taking on a second job. So how can you look at your spending and decide, how can you decrease that spending? So there's several methods. One method is called the envelope system. And actually, the University of Utah Extension has a free envelope system program on their extension website that's available to use. So what happens is, the envelope system is where you would take whatever money you have coming in and turn it into cash, and then you put into each envelope the amount of cash that would be used for paying the electric bill or buying groceries or putting gas in the car, whatever it is. So that's a way of dividing your money out into separate areas so that you only spend what's in that envelope. So if you run out of money before the end of the month, then you have to look at, okay, what did I go overboard on? and how can I correct that to get through the month. Some other things you can do to decrease spending: you can freeze your credit cards. That's one way. I've actually heard of people freezing them in a block of ice, actual credit cards in their freezer, so that they'd have to chip at that block of ice to get to their credit card before they could use it. So that's kind of an extreme measure, but it definitely is an option. Have a 24-hour rule for any purchase that you make. So if you're going to buy something, you know, you go to the store and you think, oh, that is a really cool chair, and I really think I need that chair, or whatever it is that you want to buy. Don't buy it for 24 hours. You have to go home, think about it, make sure that that's really something you want to spend your money on. If it's not in your spending plan, then maybe that's something you should put off for a while, or you know, maybe find a way to get something similar for a lot less money, either through sales or secondhand stores or something. So that 24 hours gives you a chance to kind of really go home and think it thoroughly, and you're not just buying impulse buying. So that's why having that 24-hour rule is good. Have no spend days. I know there's some families that actually, like, once a year they have a month where they eat food out of their pantries, out of their cupboards, and try not to buy anything from the grocery store other than milk and, you know, fresh items. I think that's kind of an interesting concept. They do claim that they do save a lot of money, and it's a great way to, you know, kind of clear out some of the old things that probably would have just, you know, got old and expired. So I think that's kind of interesting. Or maybe one day of the week is the no spend day, whether that's a weekend day or a day during the week where you don't go out for lunch and you actually take your lunch to work. That could be one way to have a no spending day. Make saving a game. So for some people, whether it's saving coins or saving, you know, if they get a rebate from something, that it goes into a special account, whatever it is, so that when you're saving those few pennies, those few dollars, it becomes a game. And then when you get to a certain point, you can use that for something fun. Discount codes and coupons. There's lots of ways to save money on things that you buy. You have to be a little creative. I know there's some people out there that are really like hardcore coupon users and they don't pay very much for their food. But what I've discovered through my years of research is that a lot of times, if they're really using coupons to the max, then that becomes their full-time job. It is just finding ways to cut corners, save money, and, you know, using codes and coupons to not have to pay full price on anything. So it's a great thing to do, but it can be very time consuming. The one in, one out rule, that means if you buy something, let's say you go and buy a new shirt, then as that one comes in, one of your old shirts has to go out. So that way you're not, you know, kind of becoming overrun with things. What else is there? Canceling subscriptions you don't use, or set a spending limit. So maybe you're not allowed to spend over $100 or whatever it is at a time on anything. Sometimes setting that limit kind of helps to regulate yourself so you don't go overboard and get something you really don't need. Look for free activities. If you have a family, there's tons of free activities around our area. There's actually a couple of like parents websites and magazines and things, and of course the library is a great source of all kinds of free activities. So definitely check and see what's available to you for free activities. I know when I've taught this class with another one of the librarians, she often talks about how you can get movies, and you can get like books on tape kind of thing, and or CD, I guess they are now, books on CD, and even like video games you can check out and use from the library. So there's lots of ways to save money without actually having to spend it. The other thing to think about is once a year expenses, expenses that only happen once a year, school supplies, if you owe taxes, if you pay your insurance other than monthly. Some car insurance and homeowners insurance policies are once a year expenses. Birthday gifts, holidays, those things only happen once a year. So thinking about that in your plan, your spending plan, your overall budget is going to be important, so that, if you have car tags that come due, let's say in December, I don't think they have any then, but let's just say they did, how could you put a little bit aside every month so that when those car tags come due, then you're not, trying to scrounge and find money to get them. So those kinds of things you need to plan for in your budget. I kind of touched on this a little bit, but planning for emergencies. So there's a lot of people that don't, probably 2/3 of us don't have a rainy day fund. So if you get, sick or need a car repair, something like that, excuse me, then you have that fund available to you to kind of help out and bridge that gap so that you can not fall behind on your other bills, but at least, hopefully keep going as you are. So they suggest starting with just $2 a week, which really doesn't seem like much. That could be a couple of sodas or whatever, but start small. And then after a year, you'll have about $100. So if you're able to do more than $2 a week, fine, do $10 a week or whatever. Excuse me, sorry. My allergies are getting the best of me today. But yeah, starting small is the way to go. And then the other thing about a rainy day fund is you need to be able to get to it easily so that if you need cash or something, it's readily available to you so that you can use it. Okay. Paying bills. Not a very fun topic, believe me. And there was a time when I just hated paying bills. I still do, but there's some things that you can do to kind of help ease the bite or the sting out of paying bills. So a couple of things. Decide who is going to be in charge of paying that bill. So for instance, my husband has a couple of bills that he takes care of that are his, and then I have some that I take care of. That way he can stay on top of those and make sure that they get paid on time. And then I can stay focused on the things that I need to take care of. And by splitting that up and not putting it all on one person, it makes it a lot easier to make sure that things get paid on time. When you do get a bill in the mail, they suggest that you open it as soon as it comes in. Oftentimes I like to put like on the front of the envelope when it's due, and sometimes I'll even date it like 5 days or a week before it's actually due, so that it gets into that queue for me to know when I need to get that paid. So by writing on the envelope, it's due on the 10th, and maybe it's really not due till the 20th. But if I write on there it's due on the 10th or something like that, that helps me to get it paid on the 10th, which is still before when it's due. And then that way I don't miss a payment or forget to take care of it. Pay bills on time, of course, that's critical for your credit score. And it's interesting how your credit score really does affect so many different things. It affects your car insurance, how much Like if you have a mortgage or car loan, how much you're paying on those. It affects so many things. So you do want to try and pay all your bills on time. Of course, don't send cash in the mail. If you do pay with cash, like at a store or something, be sure you get a receipt. And then large receipts for large expenses, usually over $100, a couple $100, whatever that limit is that you set. Keep those receipts so that if you need to return it or you need to have that receipt to deduct for your taxes, you've got it at your fingertips. Typically, I take a few questions now. Are there any at this point, Dylan?
Not currently,
Okay.
but
Okay.
I did
Well,
want to
uh-huh.
point out a couple of things.
Sure.
I've added some resources into the chat, so if everybody's been locked in on Denise's presentation here and all that fantastic information, you might be missing some additional resources that I've included in the chat, including some helpful pages from the CFPB. For any of you who don't know, that's the Consumer Bureau of Financial Protection. And they are very similar to, they have some overlap in their work of fraud prevention, scam awareness, and things like that the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, normally does. But they also have just some excellent resources for budget building, or building an emergency fund, which I've included in the chat, as well as constructing a budget that is customized for you. We all
Yeah.
have different items that are due at different times, some of which you can schedule yourself. So feel free to investigate that further with your particular bills, but also certain things that are always due on the fourth Tuesday, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to include another resource here in the chat. It's the CFPB's spending tracker tool, which is interactive. You can fill it out online. You can make changes to it as your situation changes. It's a great foundational tool or an early starter to building that budget. And yeah, I will stay tuned to the chat here. If you have
Thank
any
you.
suggestions or questions, go ahead and send them our way. Thanks.
Thanks, Dylan. Appreciate that. Yeah, those are excellent resources. I know the CFPB has a, you can write to them or email them and ask for different resources. They actually have one called Behind on Bills, and then they also have one on just budgeting too. So excellent, excellent resources, and it's all free. So definitely take advantage of those things. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our credit scores. Okay. It's important to have credit because if you have to take out any kind of a loan, that credit score affects the amount of interest that you could potentially pay on that loan. And to get a good credit score, you have to make on-time payments. You have to pay back any loan that you have as you initially agreed upon. If you have a really poor or low credit score at the time, you can actually, there's some things that you can do to get it back in good shape. So one thing you can do is to get what they call a secured credit card with a low credit limit. So what that means is, like, you would, let's say you're going to get a credit card and the spending limit is $200. Okay. So you would give $200 to that credit card company, and then you would spend down from that $200. And then by paying it back to get that back up, then that helps to improve your credit score. So lenders definitely look at your credit history to determine whether or not you're a good risk. And so it's really critical to make sure that you are looking at your credit. And there's tons of really good credit apps out there that you can use that are free. There's Credit Sesame and I don't know what else, Credit Karma. Or if you don't want to do that, you can actually go online and look at one of the 3 credit card companies kind of scattered throughout the year and look at it for free. The interesting thing that's happening now because of the COVID pandemic is that you can actually look at your credit score from now until April as much as you want without having to pay extra or having it be, a bad mark against you for looking at your credit score. So now's the time you can do that, which is kind of interesting. I think the Fed decided that by allowing people to look at their credit more frequently during this time would help them to make sure that they're not getting scammed and that their credit is, kind of protected. So I think that's kind of a interesting thing they've allowed people to do. Don't forget that if you do use credit on any item, you're going to pay the cost of the item plus interest. So, that's definitely something to consider if you're thinking about buying something on credit. Can you afford that payment if your income changes? So if, husband and wife, if one of them loses their job, can you still afford to make that car payment or that house payment without their help? So I think that's something to think about if you're gonna, take out a loan on something. It's always better to save the money first instead of borrowing it. Usually, if you listen to any financial experts, they often talk about saving the money and then paying cash for cars and houses and things like that. That's not always practical, but the more savings that you can do, or at least put a lot of savings towards that initial down payment, that can definitely save you in the long run, save you money and also interest charges. Don't hesitate to shop around to see if you can find a lower interest rate, whether you're buying a car or home or whatever. And then of course, take the shortest loan possible. So if you can make a little bit larger monthly payment and get that loan paid off quicker, that's going to look better on your credit score for sure. We do have a free program from the extension. It's a statewide Kansas extension program called Check Your Credit. It's an email program. You just share with us your email, and then we send out reminders scattered throughout the year. So 2266 and 1010 is when you'll be asked to check with one of the 3 credit bureaus. So the idea being by having this little reminder and nudge to remind you to check your credit. And then following those reminders, then you get an additional email telling you about how to read and understand and improve your credit score. So if you do find an error, how do you correct it? If your credit score is improving, how can you use that to your advantage? So that is a free program that you may be interested in taking advantage of. So what if you're in over your head? The worst thing you can do is ignore the problem. Talk to your creditors, and as soon as you can. If things are just not going well, be totally honest with them and tell them your situation and see if they can come up with a plan for you that is something that's realistic that you can actually afford and can pay. Whenever you do this, be sure you're getting the name and the title of the person you talk to, the date and the time of the conversation. So you want everything in writing that you can possibly put in writing. So if they come back and say, oh no, you owe the full amount, you can say, well, I talked to John Smith, the manager and on such and such date and time, and this is what he told me that we could do. So if you're talking with creditors, be sure you're documenting all those things, just to kind of cover yourself, so nothing major or bad happens. Payday loans. Payday loans have been really, you know, popular, I guess, if you want to say that, in the last few years. A payday loan is a very expensive way to get cash because you pay the fees and the interest, and then you have a short term, usually a week or days, to get it paid back. If you don't make that payment or pay it all back, then the interest rate on those payday loans is outrageous. I think one of them I heard was like over 400 and some percent. So that's just wild. And a lot of people get caught up in this thought of, well, if I could just have money today, I can pay it back Friday when I get paid. It seems like a great idea at the time, but in reality, it can push you into further debt. And I mean, not just a little debt, it can even be a lot of debt. There are other options, maybe with a bank or credit union, check with them first, or even checking, the APR in your credit card might be a whole lot less expensive than getting a payday loan. If you're trying to pay like a bill for like electricity or water or something, check with the utility company first to see what kind of emergency assistance programs they have. I know the LEAP program, which is designed to help people with high cost of heating bills, that was extended this spring. So that may be another source of getting help to pay for your electricity and water bills and that sort of thing. Be sure, and if you're going to be late with something, ask the creditor what that late charge is going to be. So if you're going to have to pay an extra $25 or $50 or whatever. And if you're really in over your head, seek counseling. There is consumer credit counseling that is free to the public. It's sponsored by the government to help you to have a person, a counselor, kind of help you figure out how you can pay those bills, and they work on your behalf to work with the creditors to come up with an agreeable solution. If you do that step, it will show up on your credit report. So you need to be aware of that going into that. But for some people, it may be the best solution of all to actually sit down with someone who is a specialist in that area and try and get the help you need to get out of debt. Rent to own. Rent to own stores, they always say buyer beware, because the total cost of the item, by the time you pay for the item plus the interest, is it really going to be worth it in the end, especially if it's a few $100s. You might be better off either just trying to save up the money or find a used version of it and see if you can do that. Because typically you end up paying 2 to 3 times the cost of that item just in interest alone. So that makes it kind of tough for people. Also, check with the stores and see if they have a layaway program. A lot of times layaway programs, you make a payment towards that item, but you're not paying extra on, or, for that item. You're not paying interest or late fees or any of that. So it's really a great way, if they do have a layaway program, to actually pay what that item is worth versus rent to own. So, okay, this chart is expenses. So looking at some things, I know everybody has their favorite you know, guilty pleasures, if you will. And these figures are fairly current. I did this probably a couple of months ago and kind of found the average prices of different things. So of course it probably could have gone up since I did this, but it gives you an idea of, you know, how much you're buying, how much that would save you in the course of a year. So if you have a can of pop every day, you know, that could save you $60 a month or $726 a year. So, um, you know, it's interesting. If you could just give up that can of pop, or you know, quit smoking, or maybe cut back on your alcohol intake, whatever it is, how much money you could save per year. So I always like to throw that in, not to, you know, everybody wants to have something that they feel like they're getting a reward or something, but you know, a lot of these things that we often take as needs are really wants. We don't have to have them. They're really just things we want to have, right? So tax credits. This year's been interesting because of COVID, but um, a lot of people, if they're in the lower income brackets, can get what they call an earned income credit. So you get credit on your tax when you file your taxes. For some people, older adults often can get what they call a homestead credit. If they own their home, still paying property taxes, they can get a credit for that. And then if you're needing help getting your taxes prepared, during tax season, we have programs, with VITA, which is a program, volunteer income tax program, that is actually run through my office here. I know the library works with the AARP folks, and they come there and prepare taxes and stuff for people. Our VITA program just ended a couple of weeks ago, and I know AARP had to close early because of COVID. So, but next year, when tax time comes around, seek out those free services, because it's definitely worth it. It saves you from having to pay a tax preparer to do that. And I know I can't speak to the AARP site as much, but I know our VITA volunteers often do back taxes for people. And, you know, if you're owed a refund, you know, as long as you get that filed, you'll still get that refund, even if, you know, you are behind a year or two. So it's still important to make sure that you're filing your taxes and getting refunds and money that's due to you. So one category in your budget that is kind of has a little bit of flexibility would be groceries. So some interesting things about groceries are that about 40% of the food we buy is thrown away every week. So that's a lot of money that we're just throwing out, either because we buy it, we don't use it, or it spoils before we get it used, whatever. So depending on how much you spend a week on food, most people spend, you know, probably closer to the $200 mark a week on food, I would guess. But if you could save $50 or $80 a week, that could definitely reduce those expenses and help you to save some money. So if there's any kind of specials or ads, I always like to look to see what's on special for the week and then try and plan my menu around it. So if hamburgers on sale this week, then I try and have at least a couple of recipes that feature ground beef in it so that I can take advantage of that sale. So the other thing to do is to make a list and stick to it. Don't, you know, go off your list and not buy things that aren't on there. That helps you to kind of control your spending as well, and buying only what you need. The other thing, shop once a week. If you could shop once a month, that would be ideal. I have not figured out how to master that. So, but usually at our house, we shop once a week. We have a grocery list. We talk about some things we may want to prepare for the week and then go from there. Definitely, it's better if you can shop by yourself, especially without kids around, because they tend to put all their favorite junk food and sweets in the cards. So, it's probably better to shop by yourself. The other thing is to never shop hungry. I know several years ago, I went to the grocery store. I was starving. I'd skipped breakfast and decided, oh, I'll go to the grocery store and get this done. And by the time I got done, I'd spent as much money as I normally would during the week. And it was all junk. It was junk food, chips and pop and cookies and all those things. And it wasn't nutritious, healthy food like I should have been buying. So that just proved the point to me that I really need to make sure I have a plan for what I'm buying, but also, not shopping when I'm hungry and then everything looks good. So don't be afraid to compare brands and quality, whether it's generic or store brand or whatever. I think it's important to compare that on a regular basis. Some people actually have like notebooks where they keep track of different prices on different things. So if they need canned corn, they know that they can get the best deal at Aldi's, or if they want to buy, a certain brand of ketchup, then they know they can go to Hy-Vee or Price Chopper and always get it at a certain price. So, that's one way to keep track of costs and also brands and quality. Choose cooking over convenience. So what I mean by that is, instead of buying, for instance, hamburger helper, you can actually make a similar product using a lot of the ingredients you already have in your cupboard, without having to pay the extra for that. Or if you're going to make a cake, make it from scratch, versus buying a cake mix. So those items are convenience items, and usually you pay more for those kinds of things. Even vegetables, if you buy your salads and your vegetables already chopped up and pre-packaged and ready to go, you're paying for someone to chop those up for you. So to save money, it's better to buy the carrots and the celery and what have you and clean and chop them up and cook them versus having them already prepared for you. Be sure you're spending money on healthy foods, not junk. And then also non-food items often cost more at supermarkets. So if you're in the grocery store and you see, I don't know, let's say a t-shirt or maybe some sort of other product, shoe or whatever. Typically, those aren't always the most affordable. Had you looked around and shopped around for other things. So if it's a non-food item, you're probably not going to save the most money at the grocery store. Now, the last bullet point there is a program that I've been working on with one of my coworkers. It's called JOCO Eats, and EATS stands for Easy, Affordable, Tasty Solutions. And it's a website that we have created and developed that are recipes that are super easy, usually 5 to 7 ingredients in each recipe. They're affordable, meaning that they don't cost a lot of money to make or to put together. We also have pre-tested all the recipes on that website. And if our taste testers, usually before COVID, we'd have 30 to 40 taste testers test recipes. If they didn't like it, it didn't make it on the website. So, definitely they're good recipes, agreeable and tasty for a lot of different people's palates. I would highly suggest checking that out. There are menu plans on that website, as well as other grocery shopping tips to help you to save money on food. So since that is one area that kind of fluctuates and it's not always the same amount every month. I kind of touched on utility bills a little bit before, especially in wintertime. There are winterization programs. Be sure when it starts to cool down a little bit that you weather strip and caulk. A lot of those things, simple caulking and a caulk gun are less than $20, and it can sure save the cost of your heating bills in the wintertime. Or even in the summer, if you're running the air conditioner, if you've got your windows caulked and sealed well, then you're not going to be having a lot of drafts and spending a lot of money on keeping your place cool. In the summertime, of course, you want to raise your thermostat so that it's cool, but it's warmer than probably what most people are used to. Usually they recommend about 78 degrees for a great place for your temperature in the summer. In the wintertime, same thing. 68 degrees, is often a lot of people shoot for, so that it's cool, but it's still pretty comfortable if you're doing things in your home. Also, they suggest installing programmable thermostats so that if you're not at home, you're at work or wherever, the thermostat automatically lowers it to a lower temperature. And then before you come home from work, then it cranks the heat back up and turns it back on. So that's how those work. There are some programs available through the utility companies. To get one of those, I would call and talk to whoever is your provider, okay, for gas or electric for that. Also, be sure you're using hot water wisely. Hot water is pretty expensive to produce. So if you can turn it down a couple degrees and still have nice warm water, that will save definitely on your utility bills. Of course, if you're not in a room, turn off the light, turn off the TV, whatever. Those are just kind of common sense things. If you're not in there using it, turn it off. And then also phones, especially cell phones and smartphones. Shop around for phone plans because you can find some really great deals and some not so good deals. So if you're thinking you want to get a new phone, then shop around, and then also do that 24-hour test where you wait before you actually purchase it and make sure that you're making a good decision about changing to a different phone. I talked about this a little bit, lowering the cost of having fun, whether it's local events, activity guides, whatever. Be sure and check out the library. They're a fabulous source for lots of wonderful things. Games, books, videos, everything. Also, you can look around and find cheaper costs for, instead of cable or streaming services, check around and see what you can find out. If you're going to have a party or, instead of going out with friends, have a potluck. Have other people share in the cost of that meal that you're wanting to have. So there's lots of great ways you can save money, but still, maybe not during COVID, but after COVID's over, definitely have parties, but make sure everybody's helping to share in the cost of that. Okay. Transportation costs, of course, carpool, ride a bus. Make sure you're staying up with regular maintenance on your car, meaning oil changes and such. That will help to do a couple of things. Helps to keep your gas usage and your car being very fuel efficient. Also, it helps to prolong the the care of your car, and also to make it to last longer. So hopefully you don't have to replace it or repair it as often. Group your errands together. Oftentimes when we at our house go out and get groceries and stuff, we kind of make a loop out of it and stop at if we need to get something at the hardware store or whatever, kind of make a big circle and then circle back to the house when we're done. Check your tires, make sure that they're aired up properly, because if one of them is the least bit low, that tire is not functioning its best, and it can impact your fuel consumption. So check that out. Also look at insurance coverage. They say you should be looking at that every year to make sure that you're getting the best deal that you possibly can. And bike or walk. So I think we tend to jump in the car, even if it's something that's just down the street. So, bike or walk to as many places as you can. Of course, it's great for your health, but also save a little bit of money too on transportation. Same thing with clothes, buying off season, buy at a garage sale, resale shop, trade with other families. That was really popular a few years ago where they would trade clothing. Also think about if you have teens at your house, give them a set limit and make them, stay within that budget. So that teaches them a couple of things. Teaches them about how to budget money and the value of money. But also, if there's something they really want, like that designer pair of jeans or jacket or whatever it is, then maybe they need to find, a part-time job or side hustle to get the money to pay for those things. And then, of course, try and wash as many things as you can. That's one thing I always do before I buy any clothing is make sure that it is machine washable, not dry cleaning or needing dry cleaning, because that does cost a lot more than just washing it in the washing machine. So some resources you can use. We talked a little bit about these. There's more resources on our Johnson County K-State Extension website. You can check those things out. Also, the Power Pay Debt program, which is from the University of Utah Extension. Fabulous program. It's all free of charge. We talked about phone apps and envelope system. Another one sponsored by the Federal Reserve here in Kansas City is called Money Smart KC. Fabulous, fabulous resource and website of information on all kinds of topics related to money, whether it's homes, student loans, anything. So it's a great resource for people of all ages, teens to adult. Okay. That's kind of it for me. Do you have any other questions or anything I can help you with? You can always call me. You can send me an email. I'm happy to help in any way I can to help you kind of get things hopefully back on track and make the most of the money that you have.
We have some more questions and comments rolling in, but we'll go in order. Evan had some great questions. I'd like you to break down, if you could, Denise, the difference between a FICO score and then an Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion score.
So yeah, the FICO score is a little bit different than a credit score because it kind of takes a lot of the information from the credit reporting agencies and puts it into one big score. So, and it's calculated a little bit different than your credit score, but it's still very important to make sure that your FICO score is in good shape as well. We do have a handout calling Know Your Credit, that also kind of goes into more detail on that. If that would be of interest, we can definitely make sure that we get that to Dylan to share with people. So
Most definitely. I'd like to point out that the structuring of those different scores is slightly different. The Equifax and FICO, you want that golf type score, that low score, as opposed to that high score in the 800s that tells lenders that you're a dependable borrower. So they're slightly different.
Hmm.
But yeah, great question. Uh,
Yes.
Evan also asks a follow up. What's the best way, the one best way, or some tips to increase a credit score? Mentions no mortgage or car payments, making payments on time. I'm assuming that's credit related
Yep.
or other debts, making payments on time, paying more than what is due on student loans. Any other tips for this very dependable borrower, it sounds like?
Yeah, yeah. Probably the one thing that really helped me improve my credit score the most was to convert. I was one of those, people that always like to write the check or pay the bill in person or whatever. But when I kind of gave up that control and set up payments where they're automatically withdrawn, or even withdrawn on a few days earlier, that really started to change my credit score. And then the other thing I think that really helps to change or improve your credit score is keeping an eye on it, making sure that you're not having a lot of credit inquiries into that credit score. And if you like try and get a loan and then you turn around and try someone else for a loan, if you get more than a couple inquiries into your credit score, that definitely puts a kind of dings it and kind of gives you a lower score till that comes off. And some of those things take a couple years before they roll off of that score. But then once they do, then really protect that score. If you're looking at buying an appliance or a car, whatever, and they're saying, oh, well, we're going to look at your credit score, find out if they're actually like looking at it really in depth or just kind of doing like a kind of, there's a way they can kind of look at it without actually hurting your credit score. So I think, you know, being really careful about anything especially when they're starting to look at your credit score for whatever reason, or if you have a company that checks it without your knowledge, sometimes some of those like insurance companies and stuff will check it periodically. If they're doing that, that can put a ding on your credit score. So, I mean, I think being cognizant of what's happening with it and then checking with each credit bureau periodically to make sure that everything on your credit report's accurate, and if there is an error that you address it right away and get it worked out. So I think those are just being on top of it is really critical. So excuse me, go ahead.
And I believe that is our last question that we had. A lot of people are just chiming in and saying, great job, this is fantastic information. So we really appreciate that. And we really appreciate all of you being here, and especially you, Denise, since you're giving all this great info. So thank you all once again for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, Denise, for
You're
all of the
welcome.
just wonderful information. Our next career and finance program will be next Thursday, July 30th, with Karen Sillins from A Plus Career and Resume. And that program will be focused on networking. Visit the events page at jocolibrary.org to register for new events as they're scheduled. Also, be sure to follow the library's Facebook page, facebook.com/jocolibrary, to receive notifications for additional live online Johnson County Library programming for all ages. Thank you all, and please stick around for that poll. I'm going to hit this big red button here and we'll stop recording. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Y'all take care.